those for? I love preaching on this piece from Mark. I love it even more if Dean is here and I can say, "Get thee behind me, Satan," but who can? And I never really know what to call a message about this. So I thought we'd just think about what our answer would be to the question, but who do you say that I am? We're in chapter 8, which is the middle of Mark's gospel. It's the shortest gospel. In chapter 4, you remember Jesus is in the boat with the disciples and the storm blows in and he's asleep. And they wake him up and they ask him to calm the sea. Do you remember that story? And in that chapter they say, who is this? Who is this person that even the storms and the sea obey him? Then in chapter 6, they're in the boat again, this time without Jesus, and he comes walking across the water to them. Let me remember what they think he is then, or who they think he is. I think he's a ghost. So here we are now in chapter 8, and we have the question. And we all know Peter usually gets the questions wrong, or the answers wrong to the questions, but he seems to get it right this time. We've known the answer to that question since the very first verse of Mark's Gospel. Because the very first verse of Mark's Gospel is this: the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Son of God. So we knew the answer. They didn't write these Gospels down until well after they happened, the events in them occurred. And so Peter catches up to us, but then he seems to miss the mark about what does that mean. Because he gets rebuked. Can you imagine being the one who rebukes Jesus? Wait a minute, Jesus, you got that wrong. He gets the answer right, but he gets the understanding not so right. How do we answer the question that Jesus asks? But who do you say I am? This is not multiple choice. This is fill in the blank. Who do you say I am? Who is Jesus Christ for you? Shirley, did you stand up because you had an answer?
I'm counting.
Shirley, you're an ex-nun. You should have some answer.
I was counting.
I understand. Now here's the question. Let me repeat it. Who do you say that I am? Who's Jesus for you? These are all really personal, individual answers. There's no right answer necessarily, like we thought there was in chapter 8. Shirley's stalling, but I'm coming back to her. You know, when I taught English for those 33 years, I had those old fluorescent lights and they would buzz when the room got totally silent. Mary, do you know what I'm talking about? They buzz, right? And you wait for the answer. And I would always say to them, I can wait and listen to these lights for a long time until somebody answers. Who is Jesus Christ in your life?
You wanted us to answer?
I do.
Oh.
I do.
Okay, for me, hope and comfort.
Hope and comfort. Yeah. Diane?
My Lord and Savior.
Lord and Savior. Linda?
Prince of Peace.
Prince of Peace. Joe?
The way, the truth, the light.
Okay. Way, the truth, and the light.
My everything, my air, my water, my supplier.
This is the air I breathe, huh?
My friend.
Yeah. You must be one of those children of the 70s. Jesus was my friend and brother. Remember that? Those of us who went through the 60s and 70s? Anybody else? Yeah, sure.
Forgiving all of our sins.
Okay. Jill?
He's the one who watches over me, and he's the one that I feed and clothe.
Ah. Scott?
Light of the world.
Light of the world. Scott?
He's my counselor and guide.
Counselor and guide? All those things. And the neat thing is, they're all right answers. Right, Shirley?
Correct.
Okay. And every one of us, has maybe a different answer on a given day, and maybe we have a consistent answer all through our lives, and maybe we came to this answer through a process of evolution. What he is, whatever, as our guide, as our counselor, as our brother, as our friend, as our solace and our comfort, the one whom we feed and we clothe and care for and find along the highways and byways of Brandon and Tampa, Florida. Yeah.
That's exactly where he is.
I think I've seen him farther south as well. Just so you know. So we would say that to Jesus, and I think he would say, yeah. But the church didn't always necessarily think the way we think. During the Renaissance, the church dominated the personal, social, and political lives of Europeans. This is according to Reverend Dr. Michael Rosnes of Luther Seminary. He says, in those days, there were magnificent cathedrals. The church commanded armies to do its will. Its leaders lived like princes surrounded by wealth and pomp. Kind of like I do. I got to say, I need to go to Ellington and get some new shoes because my last pair is dry rotted on me now. So I can't keep leaving dirt in the aisles for Al to clean up. Then he goes on to say, in its return to the Bible, the Protestant Reformation rejected the theology of glory in favor of a theology of the cross. And that's what I was hearing in our opening songs today, a theology of the cross. He says to follow Jesus is to live lives of service to others, to serve rather than to control and dominate. It means the opposite of being proud of station and status for ourselves at the expense of others. I think that's the church we believe in. I think it's the church we try to be and live here. It wasn't always the way of the church. It goes on to say the theology of the cross, or to deny oneself, does not mean a contrived kind of humility, however. We do not follow Jesus by demeaning ourselves. If you grew up in some traditional religious organization, and Shirley's now run away, so I won't ask her anything else. What I can tell you as somebody else who spent some time in the convent, that there was an exercise on Saturday night called the discipline. And discipline was when you took, I don't know, I guess they made them themselves. They had stopped doing it by the time I got there. But they made these little ropes out of rubber bands and paper clips. And then they would flagellate or beat themselves with them. Shirley, you're into that flagellation stuff? Did they do that when you were in the convent, the self-flagellation? They stopped by the time I got there, but I know I'm younger than you are, so I thought I'd ask.
I'll see you after church.
Okay. You see, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about demeaning ourselves in any way. We're not talking about, I'm the scum of the earth. That's not what it means, this theology of the cross. We are called upon to do the very best we can with the talents and abilities God has given us. Have you ever thought about that as the theology of the cross? We're called to do the best we can with the talents and abilities God has given us. And how often do we talk about that each of us is uniquely gifted, that none of us has the same gifts of anybody else? And so if you choose not to share yours, which is your choice, nobody in the world gets them because nobody else has the gifts you have. That's the theology of the cross I think we can embrace. To deny oneself means to keep one's priorities in harmony with what Jesus told us in the two great commandments. Love God and love neighbor. And there are so many emails I get from people in the United Church of Christ when they're writing to me about different committees that I sit on. And the end of the email reads, love God, love neighbor. That's the theology of the cross. To use all your talents, all the gifts you've been given, so that at the end of our lives, our tombstones all read, done, finished, gone, used up, given away, shared, because that's what it's about. That's the theology of the cross. Micah Keel, who teaches at St. Ambrose University, talks about a suffering Messiah. And he says, we need to understand the suffering that Jesus does. Because when you read today's passage, it's about the cross and it's about suffering. That's not what Peter's thinking when he says you are the Messiah. That's when we're thinking we get the keys to the candy store. Oh, here's the Messiah. He's going to save all of us. And so we get the keys to the candy store, right? But that's not what he's talking about. Jesus does not suffer and die because suffering is good. Does anybody here go, you know what, like, give me another dose of suffering because I haven't had enough this week. Please, please, please. You know, when I was in the convent, which was a lot later than when Shirley was in there, I had a friend, and we would get in trouble together.
The one you taught to smoke?
The one I taught to smoke. But
Awesome.
I usually took the blame so she didn't get more trouble than I did. But she said to me at one time, her mother was dying of congestive heart failure at the time. And we would get in trouble, and then we'd be given these penance kind of activities. And she'd say to me, Catherine, there's enough suffering in this world. Nobody needs to give anybody anymore. You already got enough. We already got enough. There's enough suffering in this world. Keel goes on to say, the necessity of the suffering comes from the way Jesus lives. A life that reaches out to those who are ostracized, unclean, or marginalized. As we sometimes say in the United Church of Christ, the least, the last, and the lost. Since we've been a church, we've tried to do that. We've tried to do that. So as we kind of think about that theology of the cross, think about the passage we just heard, and now we have to deal with those three questions on those little gold sheets somebody put on the seat near you. Because I've noticed most of you have put them someplace else. Shirley probably moved them all. These are not rhetorical questions. What gives you the greatest joy in life? What creates for you the deepest sense of purpose? When do you feel most alive, most true to the person you believe God created you to be? Those maybe are all the same question asked in different ways, is my thought. But what do you think? What gives you the greatest joy in life? Is it eating that big slab of birthday cake? Is it getting that great present? Is it having friends come and share your day and wish you well? Not only that day, but the whole year ahead, telling you what a blessing you are? What's Christmas like for you? Giving or getting? Where's the joy? Anybody want to weigh in? What gives you the greatest joy? What creates the deepest sense of purpose? Yeah, references?
Family.
Family, relationships. Steph?
Animal kindness.
Animal kindness. As in somebody's going to take that Yorkie.
Exactly.
Okay. Kim?
Keeping Logan's memory alive and trying to help the children who are still suffering.
Okay. For those of you who are new, Logan is Kim's grandson who passed just about a year ago. He had neuroblastoma, and he was part of our family. Yeah, yeah.
Being a parent, and the deepest sense of purpose is when that parenting is the most difficult.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I second that.
Okay. Linda?
Grandparenting falls into the same.
Grandparenting? Yeah, Joe.
When I make food and take it out to find the hungry in my community, and just the interaction with somebody who hasn't eaten in days, being able to feed them, makes me sing.
Lifts your spirits.
So hot.
Yeah. See? Not the theology of glory, the theology of the cross, which isn't meant to make us feel bad or to make us beat ourselves up in any way, but to allow us to breathe in God's Spirit and to reach out with God's hands. Whether it's in our own families, whether it's in our faith family, whether it's beyond these doors, whether it's beyond our borders, whatever it is. Yeah. David Luce, who, as you know, is one of my favorite Bible commentators, talks about this passage. And he talks about who Jesus is in this passage. And he says, Jesus points to a God who meets us in vulnerability, suffering, and loss. Whose vulnerability, suffering, and loss? Jesus' vulnerability, suffering, and loss? Our vulnerability, suffering, and loss? Or both? We're the only folks that have a wounded God, a suffering God, a God who made himself vulnerable. And I don't think it's about so much personal salvation, although I respect those who believe it is. I think salvation is more a community thing or communal thing. He came to save Israel. We have this God who came to love us, who made himself so vulnerable. Think about it. Is there any situation in your lives more vulnerable than at a moment when you give yourself in love to your own beloved? Do you not open yourself in ways that you just don't do anyplace else, where you trust that person completely, and you open yourself and you're vulnerable to that person, physically, emotionally, and probably spiritually, when you think about it? We get that modeling of vulnerability from Jesus, who says, you know what? God, you ask me, I'll go. I'll make myself that vulnerable so that I can love and be loved. And it's kind of a scary thing some days. Or it can be. Do you remember being like in 6th or 7th or 8th grade? I know now it's like 3rd or 4th. But 6th or 7th or 8th grade and you had your first love? Remember, how scary that was? Like, will this person ask me out? Will I ask this person out? What will we do on our first date? Will we kiss? What kind of kiss? Well, we won't go there. All that kind of stuff that happens in love. Yesterday we, Joe and Scott and myself, attended the celebration of life of Paul Simpson, Reverend Dr. Jean Simpson's husband. And she talked about their first kiss. And she said, I remember our first kiss because you kissed me on the top of my head and I thought, I didn't know I was this short. But it was beautiful. And she told us to make sure we tell the person and persons we love over and over every day that we love them. Because life is so short. So unexpected. For those who don't know, Jean and Paul were in Maine driving down the highway when a car on the other side swerved and hit them head on, swerved into their lane and hit them head on. And Paul was taken to the medical center. And one of the last things he said to Jean was, honey, I think we need to go home. Right? Honey, I think we need to go home. And Jean wrote, and we heard the reading of this. She said, it was so fast. Within 24 hours, this great gift of life went to God. And I think that's part of all of our lives. I think that's part of what this passage is about. To make ourselves vulnerable enough to love somebody that it is so incredibly, unimaginably painful when they leave us for that, what is a brief moment for them and a longer time for us, and go home to God. David Luce says, this is a God who meets us when we really need God. When all we had worked for, hoped for, and striven for falls apart. Had those moments? You don't have to have lost your beloved of 38 years. You could have lost a job. You could have lost out on college or a high school class you wanted. You could have lost out on any number of things. And in those moments, we realize we are mortal, incapable of saving ourselves, and desperately, just like the song says, in need of God who meets us where we are. A God who meets us where we are, meets us. It's okay. It's okay.
It happens.
And Luce talks about God shows up where we least expect God to be. Is that not the truth?
Yep.
God shows up where we least expect God to be. I don't know about you, but as I was thinking about this passage this week and about this thought of the theology of the cross, I thought, I think I know God most deeply and poignantly in my broken places. In those places that aren't perfect, in those places that are rough and jagged and cut me and my heart and others in their hearts as well. Those places when I'm frustrated or angry, lonely, sad, grieving, when I'm lost, when I'm feeling unloved and unlovable. Had those moments of feeling unlovable? Maybe not, everybody does. But in those places, there is the God that shows up unexpectedly, because we don't expect anybody to be there, especially in those places where I'm feeling unlovable. Why would God be there? I'm unlovable. And yet God's there. And yet God's there. Like my stole? It's a stole from General Synod. Many UCC pastors across the country now have them. They're actually made by the women in, I don't want to say it's a commune, but in an area of Nicaragua where they were able to revitalize the entire economy of their community by starting this industry of making stoles and other things, but of making stoles. And it's called the Stole of Unexpected Places. Using the General Synod theme, imagine this stole, or image this stole, it envisions God's Spirit present at times when one is barricaded, out of control, lost in humdrum routine. Now picture this, the only person wearing these are pastors, right? So that's saying something about us. Being or feeling violated, crushed, or threatened. At times when one feels alone, alienated, or alien. In the midst of chaos. I get that one a lot around here, just so you know. Forced into a corner, on the brink, trapped, or confused by being on the fence. You guys put me there, so, you know, I just want you to know that. And when I was growing up, the one thing my mother taught me was to never sit on the fence. So that's a very uncomfortable place for me to be. So when you put me there, know that I have to get myself off there. And they end the little insert they put in with the stole by saying, God is present in all of life, even in unexpected places. I think we know that. I think we get that. And what we need to be is God's hands and heart for somebody else who's feeling any of those things, feeling as if no one in this world can or will or does love him or her. And you walk up and you hand them a hot cup of soup. Or you walk up and you pat them on the shoulder. Or you give them a smile. Or you hold the door open for them. Or you help them with their groceries that just spilled all over the parking lot when they tripped over the speed bump. That's who we're called to be. So let us look for God in unexpected places. And let us be the hands and heart of Jesus Christ, who is all those things we said. Let us be his hands and his heart in all the broken and unexpected places of our world. Amen.
Amen.